have to trust, like originally why you went into this, the same respect and trust that you want, you have to give it. And I think you have to go back to the friendship part. Like, this is my friend. So how do you treat someone who's your friend? I think you should lead with that. And I think that really helps.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Let's Talk Relationships. Today, we have another episode, and I'm really excited to introduce Kesha Hughes today. She is a phenomenal woman, and I'm so grateful that our lives cross paths in life, which has been incredible. Hi, Kesha. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy. She popped into my head a couple weeks ago, and I was like, you know what? I got to get her on the podcast. Like, she is incredible. So she is the founder of Grace and Wisdom Institute, which is actually how we got connected. So I would love to start off, first of all, just hearing about your organization. I think it's incredible what you're doing, and we need more of it. But yeah, if you'd love to just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and kind of what this program means to you, and why you started it.
Well, I am first and foremost a wife and a mother, and taking that journey has led me to be extremely involved in the lives of my children and the children of other people who I feel are my children, as a village mentality. So over the years, I
Yeah.
just was paying attention to some of the things that I felt were missing, some of the gaps that I was noticing patterns with
Mhm.
other children, with the environment, with schools, and just some of the things that kind of raised a little bit of concern for me from the generation that I grew up in,
Mhm.
from the difference to the generation that my children were growing up in. And so, knowing long time ago, it was planted in me that I would work with teens. Um, I started to develop what would that look like, thinking
Mm.
about it really further away. But just kept noticing gaps, and when you kind of keep seeing a problem, you're supposed to probably get in there and do something about it. So as my child was
Yes.
was becoming a teenager, I felt like I had a group of kids that I could actually work with, and
Mhm.
start to develop a life skills program for them.
I love that, and that is Grace and Wisdom Institute.
Yes, so the Grace and Wisdom Institute is a life skills program for teens ages 13 to 19. It is an emphasis on teen girls of color, but we do have enrichment for young boys as well. And the whole point of it is to just give them some of the fundamentals that they clearly are not receiving, and it's just not even available in your everyday life unless you seek it out.
Yeah, oh, I think that's so important. There's so many things I think as high schoolers that we just didn't get exposed to at
Yeah.
all. And then you get thrown into college and they're like, "So, what do you want to do with your life?" And you're like,
I don't know. I
"How am
mean,
I supposed to know?" You
and even
know?
if you think you know, they're like expecting you to have already figured all the stuff out that you didn't even get
Yeah.
any practice with. And then you think about even prior to us going to school,
Mhm.
they had home ec,
Yeah.
trade classes. I mean, these kids can't even get driver's training at school. I
Wow.
mean, these are things that as a citizen, like you want to be able to get offered at your school. And so, with the lack of all of those necessities, even the kids were like, well, they're not teaching us how to, like, I don't know, what are we going to do? They're not teaching any of this stuff in school. So even the kids are kind of like, they kind of were side eyeing, like, how come we're only learning
Yeah.
how to sit in class and do math that they think that is not going to be applicable in the real world. But they're like, well, how come they don't teach me about my finances? So they even were
100%.
noticing some of the holes and the gaps. And so we just were like, well, there's a lot to cover. So, let's get started because I need you guys to thrive, not just go to college or go into
Yeah.
your trade, but to actually have the tools that you'll need to
Yeah.
succeed at it. Otherwise, you're going to
Absolutely.
spiral into a whole different direction.
Well, yeah, and then you're kind of like trying to find yourself and understand, like you're trying to do all that in college, but it's like you can't waste too much time in college either because you kind of have to have a degree chosen. Like otherwise you're just going to be in school for however many years. And also it could prevent you from going to college. Maybe some people can
Right.
go to a trade school and can do an incredible work there or go a different direction. Maybe they realize they love doing hair or they want to be an electrician or they want to do, more trade programming versus going through a four-year university. But it's like so hard when you're not exposed to that in high school.
Yeah. And having, we like them to have the ability to get a little self introspection so that you can ask
Mhm.
yourself those questions, but be confident
Yeah.
enough to say, hey, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What am I really good at? What are some of my options? They're not even being presented with the confidence to ask themselves these types of questions, at least on a mass scale. Some children
Yeah.
have that, particularly children who have, like, private schools. They have a whole set of skills they don't have either.
Mhm.
Um, but they have different access. But the
Yeah.
average kid going to public school just doesn't have those resources. And so we just felt like we have to really change the trajectory of these people who are going to be up next in charge of us, and be leading
Yeah.
our countries and our communities.
That's yeah. That's incredible. I think that's like I think back to like you said, we used to have home ec, we had cooking, we had sewing, we had all these different and we had creative and arts. And
Yeah.
I feel like so much of that is slowly being stripped away in high school. And it's just it's so sad because I think in that, I think what you and I were talking about, like that's also how you get to know yourself better, but you also build relationships with others. You build, these interpersonal skills that I feel like a lot of our kids are just not getting exposed to early enough, and it's sad. And even finances, I think that's a huge one. Like even for us, like I think about my age, I wish someone in college or even out of college
Right.
offered something because I had no idea what I was doing in my early 20s. Nothing. No one talked to me about 401ks, retirement savings.
No way.
So none of that. And I literally was like, "Oh, cool. I guess I'll put money." I had no. My parents didn't know about it. I didn't have any great knowledge
Right.
about it. My family, my sisters, like we were all kind of going in blind, and it's mind blowing to me that we don't actually get taught these things in school at
In
all.
school, like,
Basic, like this is how you file taxes. This is why you save. This is like it doesn't even have to be like pushing an agenda. It's just like
exactly.
basic finance, budgeting.
Budgeting. Yeah, and so you're walking around with kids at this point who literally they don't even handle cash.
Mhm.
And if you know, when you don't have cash, it's a lot easier to swipe. But when you have
So
like 20, when you had $20 and you would see it like
Mhm.
literally disappear, you like, wait a
Yeah.
minute,
You're
you know what?
like,
I want to keep this last five. And then you
mhm.
make a different decision. Whereas you're swiping all the time, or at this point we're tapping,
I
it's
know.
it's a disconnect.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, you have the lack of the preparation in the first place, and so they're completely disconnected with what it's going to take in order to actually have the lifestyle that a lot of their parents have exposed them to, and
Yeah.
being able to maintain it. It's not really sustainable, essentially. And so what we're trying to do is show them that they can do these things, but there are certain things that you have to do in order to achieve these things. And
Mhm.
then also for them to have safe spaces to
Mm.
figure it out, as opposed to having to figure it out on the spot at the job immediately when a lot is on
Mhm.
the line. We're
Mhm.
trying to give them a little wiggle room to say, hey, you do have to figure this out, but at least this is a space where we can critically think about it. And
Mhm.
it's okay to fail, it's okay to not know, but here are some tools and resources to help you get better.
I love that. I think that's such important work that you're doing. And I think something we were talking about too is what are you noticing also in that generation too when it comes to like building relationships with others? What are you seeing in that generation?
So we have a huge issue with connectivity. They have a phone and they use it at every given moment. That there's a ounce of silence, a
Mhm.
pause in a conversation, a pause or a shift in attention. They're immediately going to their phone. They use it as a crutch. I mean,
Mm.
they're doing it like walking down the street instead of paying attention to their surroundings. It
Yeah.
also gives you a cocoon, so people kind of don't mess with you or they don't talk to you. And sometimes that's safer for people who have a little more shy or they struggle with
Mhm.
having to say something or not knowing what to say, instead of just kind of pushing through it and
Yeah.
figuring it out and learning about it and feeling confident enough to say it's okay. Well, that person, that they didn't respond to me, but it's okay, I'm still going to do this. They do not practice this at all, and so they're very alone. They're actually
Ugh,
very isolated, and these fictitious lives that they lead on the internet is not reality. And that's where they
yeah.
get most of their practice. And that's where they so-called build relationships. So there's nothing really concrete that they're building. So it's a huge problem because they continue this until they're in their 20s, and it's okay. So now they're dating. You have to show up, but they
Mhm.
didn't really get enough practice. So it's a huge issue, and those are some of the things that we also do. Again, we're trying to cultivate new friendships,
Mhm.
Again, we are our own community. So even if you might not do that as much, maybe at your school, you when you come and do things with us, you put your phone down. You
Mhm.
can use your phone. It's sometimes necessary and part of like workshops, but a lot of times you don't need your phone. We're actually talking, we're actually listening, we're not lecturing, we're doing an engagement because they have to continue to practice. We're doing eye contact. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So there's a lot of work to do there, and it's so much value in that, and they're super far behind as a
Mm.
result with the relationship building.
Ah, that breaks my heart to think that,
Hmm.
like, this generation is so like, when you said they're so alone, I was like, "Ugh," like, that hurts 'cause I know, we're dealing with it, I think, worldwide, kind of this, like, loneliness epidemic,
Yeah.
and I think people don't realize it's not because they're not around people, like, or it's not that they're physically necessarily alone, they may be, but it's this lack of deep connection that we just
Mhm.
don't know how to cultivate anymore, and I see it we see it in our dating culture, we see it in so many parts of our world and our lives, and it's so sad. Like I feel for these kids, like they don't know any different because no one's
Right.
teaching them any different, you
They
know?
don't even know, like, at least we kind of have two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
We see how it was, and then we see what's happening, whereas this is all they know.
Mhm.
And we really as adults have to have a bit of a wake up call to say, because we see it, but we just didn't think it's probably going to be as bad, and it is that bad.
Yeah.
So I consider most of the students, like, we're not dealing with um, the traditional at risk that people discuss, particularly when you hear
Mm.
nonprofits and you work with youth. A
Yeah.
lot of people are like, oh, at risk youth. All of them are at risk.
Mhm. You're like, "It's the
So
whole generation."
it's the whole generation. I do find that some of the kids who actually come from more humble beginnings, actually, in some cases, particularly a lot of students who live in like households where they might be first generations, they actually are doing better because they do have more relation, and they have more like
Mhm.
a variation of generations in their home.
Yeah.
They're expected to figure a lot more out. They have responsibilities that would have them to have to do other things besides just kind of
Mhm.
sit around and scroll, and
Yeah.
they tend to do a little better. A
Yeah,
little
that's
struggle is
interesting.
okay.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I come from immigrant parents, so and it's like you are doing chores at the house, like, and you are helping with this, and they put you to work. They're like, you don't have time to be bored, and I feel like
Right.
that was the in the sense like my mom would find something for us to do if we needed to, but I think that's what was fun about our generation is we were bored. We would get bored. We're like, oh, I went outside and played, but now I'm bored. Like, I feel like today, even as an adult, I feel like we have such little time to just be bored and to like
Mhm.
have our imaginations kind of expand and think of other things to do. And it's like we don't have that. Every moment is filled. Every second of the day is filled. Whether it's doom scrolling or we're just busy, But it's yeah, it just made me think about that. I was like, remember when we were younger, we actually had moments where we were like bored and we had to figure out ways to get it to be entertained, and we'd go out. I remember digging, like I wasn't even like 5, I was like 10, 11, digging in the looking for worms. Like it's like things like that, like you just discovered interesting,
And those
um
are you're always learning, and those are great ways
yeah.
to continue to activate your neurons. So if you can, if you remove that, if you just think about even yourself, right? If you remove that, there's a lot of development that wouldn't have happened, right? And so
Oh yeah.
we are distracted with things that are not as important, and that's all of us, right? Just
Mhm.
because of the pace of society at this point, that all your time someone is trying to get your attention and
Mhm.
fill all the spaces with information, or the need for you to be doing something.
Yeah.
Um, Kids need to not do something all because we're making them too busy, particularly because they're not paying bills and things like that. They just shouldn't be. They should be a little bored. But even with the confines of being bored, you still had something to go figure out,
Mhm.
and you had some parameters. Whereas now they're being bored and they're scrolling. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're not utilizing their brains to unboard themselves. They're
Yeah.
just looking for something again to continue to distract them, and a little bit of overstimulation. You know.
Yeah, I think a lot of overstimulation when I think about even as as an adult, like I literally have to delete Instagram off my phone. Like I don't even have the self-control enough to like, oh no, I'll just won't look at it. I'm like, no, I'm compulsive at this point of clicking on the app. And I don't even care to like look at it. Like it's when it's off my phone,
Well,
I don't even think about it, you know? But it's like I can't imagine as a young kid, like I have a developed brain where I understand, well, this is a waste of my time and I should delete it. But as someone who's younger, there I don't imagine that they're always thinking that way. They're not thinking ahead. They're not thinking about that. So it's just it's like it's this constant battle because technology is only get it's advancing to an insane degree. Like now with
mhm,
Chat GPT and AI for kids, I'm like it's dumbing me down. I'm like using it to like write this thing and write that thing. And
right.
it's like, it's a little scary. I'm not gonna lie. Like when you think about in the next like 10, 15 years, I'm like it's a little bit scary.
Yeah, and the question that I ask, which I believe I know the answer to, is it really worth it? You know, and is does that really make is it really better? I don't know. I think God gave us so much in our own minds, and
Hmm.
if you think about all the great minds and the great inventions, and
Hmm.
even the minds that have created this technology, the usage of your mind though is still so important, and we're really amazing. So I mean, do we really need that much help? Because then we're stopping and we're not doing the amazing thing, which is using our brains.
Oh, 100%. Like when you start learning more about, I got really into like psychology and understanding our nervous system, and even just that alone, it's like God was so creative when He made us. Like, I mean, the intricacies, especially our brains and how
The
everything works.
intricacies.
It's just the more I learn, the more I'm like, I don't understand people who don't believe in God. Like these,
Right.
like, like the more you learn about the human mind and the body and our emotions and how everything's connected, like the nervous system to our emotions to our health. Like when you're stressed, like digestive issues. When this happens, it's like everything is connected, and it's it's just so fascinating to me. I could do a whole I know this about relationships, but I could do a whole podcast on like health and all that because it's just so fascinating. But it is, it's like we're dumbing it down. We're dumbing all of it
Mhm.
down with all the and like I'm a product of it. I'm using some of this the stuff, like I can't
Mhm.
chat GPT is great. Like
Yeah,
have
it's
full
great.
conversation with her, but I am seeing that I'm like, oh wow, like this could do a lot of things. And it's like in that case, it's like we're choosing productivity and more over just using our brains for that. It's like we
Right.
want speed, we want it now, we want everything quick. And it's going to be a detriment to I think to our younger generations. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to develop the way they should be developing. They're not using their brains. They're not using all these things. That's how your brain, like you've got to use it. You've got to
You
it's a
have to
it's a
use
muscle.
it.
It's got to be used.
Absolutely,
So,
100% agree with you. And then when it comes, like bringing it back to relationships, it's the same thing. Like a good relationship has to be cultivated. It has to develop. It's not like, hey, Beatrice,
mhm.
let's have a relationship. And
Yeah.
it's gonna be, it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes cultivation and things like that. And so if we're moving so fast and we don't value the time of investment and the pace,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and appreciating that we are moving so far over it. How is it going to be the best that it can be?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's just scary to think about about all of it and especially with these, like if they're not cultivating and learning relationships now at their age, it's like they're going to really struggle in relationship. And there are stats now that are saying a lot of men in their 20s are they're like I'm going to butcher the stat, but there are more single young men than there ever have been in their 20s because
Mm,
they're just not in relationship. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be. I mean, if you think about it, the way dating apps and all that has, like, they don't have to be. And it was a pretty large stat. I wish I could quote it, but I when I read that, I was like, what? That's a lot. I think it was like it was big. It was not it wasn't like 10%. It was like 70, like a good large portion of
Jeez.
men. And then that pushes marriage and way later. I
Right.
mean, our that means fertility issues for women, not having kids. Like, you start looking at the ripple effect of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a bigger issue than I think we like recognize. And our birth rates have already declined this in
Exactly.
2024, which is
Exactly.
huge. I think one of the first times it's declined in decades, and we're just not having kids like we were. We were having a lot less children. And so
Yeah.
I just see that stat continuing to decline because, I
Yeah.
mean, it all, like, it's crazy to draw that correlation, but it all stems with, like, how are we cultivating relationships with our kids, and how are kids cultivating relationships? Are they practicing that as they
Right.
get into their 20s, as they develop friendships and relationships? Like, are they actually being, trained in that
Right.
and cultivating
Right.
that? So,
100%. 100. Like I'm with you, and I definitely know that is a correlation. It's interesting because like I got married when I was really young. I was in my
mhm.
early 20s, and sometimes I didn't even think that was going to be the case at all. If you would have asked me, or if you would have said, "Look, this is when you're getting married," I would have said, "You have me confused with someone
Like,
else."
no way.
No way. But and then particularly my husband, he's like, no, like you're supposed to grow together. It's okay. Like if
Mhm.
you and then when you're building your family and then you have your kids when you're able to, and it makes sense. And I understand people are having kids later. But that immediately will drop how many kids you have, right? The later
Oh,
you
yeah,
start, the less kids you're gonna have. And
absolutely.
I only have two, and I didn't really want any more. But you think about it on the mass scale, and you just have, and the more family members you had, those are more dynamics and relationships that you
Mhm.
had to deal with, so all that practice is eliminated.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about back in the day too, you had, like, families stayed together more. So aunts,
Yeah.
uncles, cousins. Like,
Right.
I know in my community, the Romanian community, like, we're very tight knit community, and that's the community I grew up in. And it was like, yeah, people's, like, aunts, uncles, grandmas, everyone was, like, lived together near each
Mm-hmm.
other. Like, my mom's best friend moved to America too with her, so it's like they were close by. We had they were basically our brothers and sisters. They were extended
Right.
family, and we were in such a tight knit community. And now as an adult, when I see myself, living out here in LA, I'm like, wow, this is so, like, it can be so isolating,
Mm-hmm.
but
You
you
might
see
not
so
even
many, like,
know.
yeah. And it's like, I think we just get so much further from, like, the nucleus, like, of family. And I
Yes.
think that's also part of this loneliness epidemic. The
Mm-hmm.
further we're getting from that, we're kind of we're moving away from more of the traditional family. And I don't know if that's a good thing. Like, I know it's just how society is moving, but I don't think people realize the effect that it's having on our society.
100%, I agree, and like, I'm not a clinician or whatever, but
Yeah.
what is the problem that people aren't realizing is they're addressing some of the dysfunction that all families have some level of dysfunction.
Oh,
Let's just be real.
100%.
But then there were atrocities, right? And families did
Mhm.
stay together under really bad circumstances. But it wasn't the family that was the problem. It was this relationship, this individual in that
Mhm.
family, or these individuals in that family, that where a problem was
Yeah.
created. But the idea of the family isn't the problem. And I think people have gotten that mistaken, that
Yeah.
it's like the family is the problem. No, that's a really great design. And
Yeah.
it's worked. And as you can see, the further we're moving away from the nucleus of the family, like you're saying, it's the ripple effects are very serious.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more problem, and I see that in a lot of things. Like, the further that we're moving away from God's design of things,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
like, people might think that's old school, and people might think, oh, that's so, like, conservative or whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not even about that. I'm like, you just look at how God intended for things to be. And I'm like, yeah, if you really backtrack, the further and further away we keep getting from it, we think that it's better. But in reality, it's not. It is not better. Like, look at our
It's not.
society. It is quite literally falling apart. Like,
Hmm.
not to, like, sound doomsday, but, like, a little bit, like, society is. And it's like, because in so many ways we've challenged kind of what the original design was.
Right.
in many ways. In some ways, it's like, yeah, I feel like we keep moving further away, and then we're surprised why it's not working.
And then we're surprised why it's not working. And then we're searching for, well, why could that be and how could that be? And
Hmm.
it's really clear and dry. Like, I know for a fact that I did not design myself.
Hmm.
And based on that alone, and based on how amazing and intricate I am as a human amongst all these other humans on this planet within this universe, I clearly can't know it all because
Yeah.
I didn't sit down and draw this whole thing out. So there is something, some power, creator that has a little more knowledge than I do. And so with that, I mean, I can't be smarter than the creator. It's like if you have a chair and someone's like, I mean, I like the chair, but I mean, it could be a chair, but I mean, you can't be mad because I want to use it as a table. I'm like, I mean, you could use it as a table if you figure that out, but it won't be its most effective use because
Hmm.
this was designed as a chair. It just
Yeah.
is, go make a table.
Yeah.
But a chair has specific functions, and the person who designed it knew what they were doing. So you can take it and try to twist it up, but it will not perform in the way that it was intended, which means it will not be its best.
Yeah. Oh, amen to that. I think that's so true though. And like we look at like God's original design for marriage, and we look
Yeah,
at like, relational dynamics that he wanted and he designed, and it's like it just works. Like a lot of the
yeah,
time, the way he did it, it works. And sometimes I get baffled. Like, yeah, like we think we know better, so we're gonna go try and figure
yeah.
it. I'm like, Lord, just tell me what to do, because
Tell
I'm
me
like,
what to do.
I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But I would love to hear more about. I mean, you've been married to 22 years, which
Yes,
is
22.
incredible. I know you were just saying your daughter's off to college. I'm like, you have a kid that's in college. Oh my
I can't
god,
even believe it. I really
that's
can't believe
crazy,
it. Well,
crazy.
my husband and I are, like I mentioned, I got married when I was a lot younger, but he wasn't a stranger, right? This is a guy that I kind of grew up with. Our families knew each other. We went to the same church. Our church had a school. We went to the same school. He was older than me when I was younger. So, there was a disparity of age range, but we still knew each other. So I had the ability or the privilege of having insight onto where he came from,
Mm.
like what kind of
Yeah,
crop,
you
he
knew.
was,
Yeah.
and with that, he was always flagged as that kind of guy,
Hmm.
and I remember saying, I mean, he's my friend. That's the kind of guy you marry. Like, I wouldn't really just like mess around or, I mean, that's the marrying type, you know.
Hmm.
I didn't put it together that he would be the guy I married that early on, but I did notice that in him, and so we were friends for a long time. Like, he came to my prom party, but I went with someone else. He
Yeah.
was my friend. I had a picture of him and his girlfriend in my, back in the day we used to go to the like
Oh
portrait
my god. Yeah.
studios and you would take a picture with your boyfriend and then you pass it out to all your friends. Like, I have
Yes.
a picture of him and his girlfriend who was my friend. So, we
Yeah.
really had the history, but because of that we got to know each other just as people. So first
Mhm.
and foremost, like, there, we didn't have this pretense. When we did start to date, we were getting to know each other in a different way, but we really didn't know who we were.
Yeah.
And I think that that was a benefit, because we had one level of relationship that we still needed to build, but we had some kind of foundation versus like blind date. I'm sure those work out pretty well for a lot of people, but I think that um, having to show up as yourself was
Mhm.
was relaxing. It was like a relief
Mhm.
to be able to show up as yourself, and then you can make a decision. Oh yeah, I like this person. Like, I like being around this person. Like, I like going to lunch with this person, and there's no strings necessarily attached. But no, I actually really like spending time with this person, and that's kind of that was our foundation
So
before we
how did
slid
it
into.
yeah, I was like, well, how did it slide into a little bit more than that?
You know, I got in trouble. Something happened, and he called at a time where I was like in a moment, like
Mhm.
about to freak out, and he happened to have called. I believe at that time we were talking a little bit more, but he called
Mm.
me in a moment. And I remember he said, "Do you want me to come?" And I said, "Yeah." he was so quick to come, you know,
Wow.
something happened right there. I was like, oh, he's just going to come at the drop of a hat because I sound, like I'm in distress. And he was there for me. And for whatever reason, that started to like turn, something
Mhm.
turned in that particular moment. And then I was open to, seeing him in a little more of a romantic light, so to speak. So I opened myself up for that, I would say.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah. And then from there, it was like, oh my God, he's a great kisser. Like, oh, these are things that, weren't necessarily on the brain at first. Um, Trying to stay in the friend zone because I wanted to stay a part of his life.
Yeah.
And I was young, or what, 19 or 20. And at that point
Mhm.
in life, everybody around you, they're just kind of, oh, who, oh, him, oh, no, he's not anymore. Like, oh, we don't talk to him
Yeah.
anymore. And that was everybody. And I just didn't want that with him.
Mhm.
And then it kind of shifted, and then it just went on from there. And we stuck it out, and we dated for 2 years, I think, before he proposed.
So did he have a similar, like, shift for him? Like, was it a similar moment, or was the shift for him totally different? Or did he always kinda? Because sometimes men, I swear,
I
like,
know.
they're always, like, in the back of their heads, like,
Yeah.
or but they won't
Right.
if they think it's just friends, they're like, "I ain't crossing that line."
Yeah, they'll stay in the friend zone even though they're willing to cross, and
Yeah.
they wait,
Oh,
right?
for
They
sure.
wait for you to cross over. So I feel like he was definitely more willing to wait for me
Mm.
to cross over. But I'd have to ask him when that was. But I think it was before that. It
Okay. I
just
had a
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I had
think
a feeling.
his brother, they joke, but his brother's he takes the credit for telling him to, like, keep your eye on that one, kind of thing. So I think he listened to his brother a little bit, like, okay, I
I love
guess I
that.
should stick around for a little bit and see where that might go.
I love that. So, so that okay, so you guys have been married 22 years. That's how you guys met, building off of a really great friendship, which I think is so valuable. What has been like throughout your marriage? What do you feel like has been like the characteristics that you guys each had to embody to like really allow it to flourish for this many years? Like what
Trust
in
is
you had to like change?
hmm, yeah, it's a lot of growing, right? Because somebody shows up as an adult. It's not like they're not a child, so you can't like tell them what to do. You can't
Yeah.
control them. And so you kind of have this idea in your mind how someone is, but you don't really know because you're living with them. So now they're like your
Mhm.
roommate, they're like your family member. And things start, things change. But I think one of the things would be trust.
Mm.
You kind of have to trust, like, originally why you went into this. You have to trust that um, the same respect and trust that you want, you have to give it.
Mhm.
That's a big part of it. And you have to, again, I think you have to go back to the friendship part. Like, this is my friend. So how do you treat someone who's your friend?
Mm.
How do you show up for them? How do you listen to them? How do you um, kind of adjust some of your expectations for them? And then I think you should lead with that. And I think that really helps. And then you just have to say, hey, I mean, I made a decision. So I have to give them that benefit.
Yeah. What are some expectations, because you were young when you got married, so what were some expectations that you kind of walked into marriage with that you realized, "Wait a second. This is not this is not,
Right.
what I thought."
I think I was surprised. I think, and it's because you're young. I knew that I didn't know. I did know that. I knew I was
Mhm.
like, I mean, I love him. I'm down. Like, I'm down to do this. I know we're saying forever. I'm totally committed to that. But I knew I didn't know what that
Mhm.
really meant. So I knew that. So I wasn't
Yeah.
caught off guard how some people are, because
Mhm.
they kind of fall apart. But
Yeah.
I knew, but I had the expectation that I don't know.
Mhm.
But then also I realized that we did enter with expectations that we didn't necessarily consult about.
Mhm.
So I learned that along the way. Um, like, I guess I have expectations, but did I necessarily have a conversation about these expectations, or am I kind of playing these out in my own
Yeah.
mind, expecting this of someone else,
Mhm.
and vice versa? And that's usually where you're, when these types of things happen,
Mm.
it's probably because you had a lot of this going on, and it
Mhm.
wasn't it wasn't a lot of this going on,
Yeah.
and so being willing to kind of check that.
Mm.
And then I put in everybody's card when they get married, like, choose your battles wisely.
Mm.
Is everything worth the battle?
Mhm.
Could you possibly be one for one? Some things are fairly minor, but we tend to create battles around them, and it's like, is that what you want your energy to be all the time? You're gonna diminish. But if you want to, like, go for the long haul, you really have to kind of always kind of reevaluate yourself, particularly your expectation. And was that expectation fair?
Mhm.
And was that all up in here with
Yeah.
you, or was it a shared expectation that wasn't met? I think that's a really big one.
Yeah. I think that's something I hear a lot when I ask, because I'm always asking people who've been married a long time, like, what does it take? And I think that's a common one. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it's self awareness. It's being
Mhm.
able to sit with, like, I'm really pissed right now. And I don't know why I'm real, but am I going to lash out in this mood, or am I going to sit with it for a little bit and understand why am I even mad? Like, what's happening internally? And I think that's such a valuable skill that, like, I think I talk
Mhm.
a lot about on this podcast, because it's a skill that we can be practicing in our singleness, with our friends, with our family, with, it's not a skill we just pick up only when we get married. Like, it's a skill we
No.
can actually go into marriage with, especially for those of us that are getting married a little bit later in life. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of skills that I think when you're young, getting married in your early 20s, there's a lot of skills you just don't have, and you are growing together. You're learning it together. But then the flip side of it is, when you're getting married older, is you now go in with a lot of expectations, but I think we have to be really mindful of, like, one, yeah, are they are they realistic? But two, it's like it's an opportunity for us to start to work on a lot of these skill sets that are going to be needed in a long-term relationship, It's like, if you're older now, it's like, you may as well come prepared.
Right, right, right. And then that goes back to, again, why the life skills development is so important, right? Because you're
Yeah,
speaking to
absolutely.
self awareness, which it doesn't start then, it
No.
starts, and there's so many types of relationships where this is necessary,
Oh,
for those
absolutely.
relationships to flourish. So again, getting the young people, and we're awareness, because that's part of our mission, is social, personal, and community
Yeah.
awareness, and having those, and just at least starting to fine tune it. You're not necessarily in mastery mode yet, but again, you've already started.
Yeah. I think it's just about getting curious. Like,
Right.
sometimes we get triggered and we get in a bad mood, and, like, I had, like, literally, it was last weekend or 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. I swear, like, this toddler in me just came out, and I was sitting with it, and I'm like, "Oh my God, like, what is going on?" Like, I just was like, I could feel it. Like, I was like, "I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this." And it was just like, when you start to become aware of it, you just sit with it, and you're like, this is so weird. In the past, I would have reacted out of it and been like, oh, I'm in a bad mood, or this, or I would have, you know, and it would have totally come out. But, like, in the moment, I'm like, what? Like, you just feel all these things happening internally. And I had no idea how to do that when I was in my 20s at
Mm,
all, literally. No idea. I would just probably lash out in that, or just be like, what, I don't think I would even ask myself why I'm feeling a certain way. It was just,
right.
this is how I'm feeling. And I wonder, though, how many people go into marriage with, well, this is how I feel. And it's just that attitude
It's just that
immediately.
attitude. And then imagine, like, you were able to sit with it, but if you can just imagine for a moment, your kid, is coming in the room, like, right after you are kind of trying to have a moment of realization, and you need to switch gears, and the other one almost fell off the counter because they were climbing up trying to get something, on the third shelf, and then you didn't even get a chance, right?
Mhm.
And then your spouse comes in and starts talking to you about something that you weren't even like, where'd that come from? You know what I mean? So you have all those other dynamics, and a lot of times, you don't even get a time to process.
Oh, that's
But it,
so
yeah,
true. And then you
yeah,
react, and then there's an argument. And then it goes back to being able to, at the end of the day, be like, "Oh, that wasn't I don't feel good about that." Like, being able to go in and apologize. I feel like that's
right.
probably a huge one, is having the humility and giving each other grace in a lot of those
Hmm.
moments. Um,
Giving
and
the
being
grace,
mhm.
and sometimes on the front end, because it's a lot
Ooh,
better to give it like on that front end so that you don't have to come in behind, right, the
mm-mm,
incident. You know,
give it
could
later.
I possibly give grace with my thought process before I like go into
Mhm.
combat?
Oh, 'cause it's
Um,
wild up here, man. You'll come up with all sorts
how,
of, like,
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, and we are guilty. I am guilty.
yeah?
And we're wrong so many times. We do this
Mhm,
whole movie. It's like a whole picture,
mhm.
motion picture going on,
Yep.
and it's like,
It's
no, that
detailed
wasn't.
too. It's detailed. You got every little detail down, and they're like, "What? You were
Yeah,
thinking that?" You're like, "Yes." You're
and they're
like, "You're not
like,
even close."
not even close, not even
Yeah.
close.
Well, it's funny
So,
'cause it's, you know what it makes me think of too? I feel like with women, we do this a lot, but, like, we come up with these elaborate stories of what we think guys are thinking. Like, even when we're dating, we're like,
oh
"Oh
yeah,
my god, he didn't do this because of this elaborate, like, story." And then we come to find out he was like, "Oh, I just didn't respond because I didn't have my phone with me for like 6 hours." You're like,
yeah. You're like,
"Oh, so that look you gave, no, no," like,
no, none of it wasn't. Yeah, and it's
no.
again these things that we're creating in our head and then
Yeah.
projecting that, and it's really unfair. And it's
Mhm.
important to, I mean, you don't want to stay here, right? You want to be able to
Yeah.
communicate. It's just to be able to do it in a space where everybody can hear each other, you know. So a lot of times giving the grace on the front end is going to
Yeah.
help, um, and you giving yourself a little more time. Most of us always do better if we don't speak, don't react
Mhm.
immediately. We calm down, we
Mhm.
think it through. um, we should circle back, but when we
Mhm.
circle back in a safer space, a calmer space, we're going to both be able to have a conversation, and it not be, something you have to go apologize for.
Yeah. In What do you feel like in today's dating world, in relationship world, that
It
you,
has.
because I was gonna say, yeah, what do you think has been like the what do you I'm like, how do I ask this stuff? Like, what
Okay.
do you think today's issues are? Because that's basically what I want to say. Like, because you've been married, 22 years. That's a significant amount of time. What are you? Because and you're obviously around. I'm sure you have single cousins or
Hmm.
nieces, nephews that are maybe in their 20s, or what are you seeing out there that you feel like is been that makes it so difficult today?
I think that people, um, I mean, fundamentally, it's the lack of relationship, of connectivity,
Hmm.
people's fear of connectability, and then they've had so much opportunity to live in this fantastical approach that they don't
Mm,
even know who they are themselves because they've just spent so much time, like, it's
yeah,
apps, it's so, um, I mean, it's fairly,
digitized.
superficial and
Yeah,
digitized, and that's kind of how at least you get on the platform. That's at least how you present originally, but people spend a lot of time in that, and so
yeah.
it gives a lot of it takes a lot longer to get kind of all the way through it, and then I think people are afraid, and so they
Mhm.
don't want to bother with what it takes to
Mm,
develop. I think it's just the fear, right? Because you've seen so many things go wrong that why would I even why bother? Like, I don't want that pain when I can keep having like these little snippets of something cool,
yeah.
and then when it kind of doesn't, I can just kind of move away. But that's not sustainable either.
No, it's
But everybody,
unfulfilling.
they tell me, they say it's hard. So they say it's hard out here. I
Yeah.
wish more people would, people don't really set, I mean, maybe people set each other up, but there was something about, people setting each other up. That was another era too, where, you'd have something at your house and you'd bring
Oh, yeah.
so and so's, and, they'd meet. And the reason why some of that people, young people would roll their eyes, but at least the parents were like, but we get it. We kind of know what kind of people they are.
Yeah.
We're just trying to put you and connect you with people who at least we think, you would click with.
Mhm.
Because in the end, that's what it's going to boil down to. You can't stay with anybody that you can't connect with. And you don't marry just one person, you marry their family. So,
True.
when the older people were seeing that, and that's how they were kind of evaluating somebody, if their compatibility. Whereas, the
Mhm.
younger person, they wanted to do it more of an independent thing, and it has to be just this, and it's just me and this person. It's like, but it's really not. You marry them and all the things that they grew up with, and all those people they grew up with, and all those influence, like that all comes with this person. They don't leave that.
Mhm.
So there was some value to, the setups and things like that. And maybe I think everybody should just look in their yearbook of life and just kind of start to think of those people who they actually really had great connections with. Like, and
Yeah.
what's going on with those people? Because when you really connected with somebody, and it wasn't um, something you were trying so hard because you wanted to,
Yeah.
okay, I want to do sexy. Okay, so we're doing
Mhm.
sexy. So this is like, if you were just being yourself and you really made a genuine connection with someone who was being themselves, that's something to build on. Like, that's a great
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, and that's how you build longevity with somebody,
Yeah,
right? Because I think that's what I always hear from people. They're like, it's marriage long term. It's like a lot of it's also just the everyday things. Do you enjoy being with this person? You know,
every day. Like, we laugh a lot. I like to
I love that.
laugh. I think he's pretty hilarious, but not overt. It's
Hmm.
you're hilarious in the moment where you just made like a side comment. But
Hmm.
I need that. Like, that gets me all through all the years. Is that much laughter. That was good for my soul. You know what I mean? Way more laughter than anything else. But just that it's a level of comfort. But that's
Hmm.
because uh, we are friends and we're in a relationship and it's day to day, somebody that you can tolerate, somebody that you like being around for no other reason,
Yeah,
just because, you know.
yeah. I wonder too if we overemphasize like the attraction part and the maybe the status part or the what us being together means and how we look together. Like I
Mhm.
think in our society we're very visual in that way and
Mhm.
I think we're programmed that way. I think it's
Yeah,
also an unlearning also a lot of that as you are looking for a partner. It's like there's a lot of unlearning those expectations of like, oh, this is what it should be. And I think we miss out on great partners because of that. And
I
I'm
agree.
guilty of it. Like I'm saying it because I question this in my life all the time. I'm like, why haven't I found anybody? I have to ask myself a lot at the time. Like, is it my own expectations? Is it am I letting great guys pass me by, or it's all that. And that's like a hard truth to have to like kind of sit with yourself and be like,
Hmm.
am I the problem?
But
you
it would
know?
go both ways, right? It would be
Yeah.
the combination of you asking yourself that question, and all the other ladies, and the other gents, they all like it takes both sides, right? So if two people are missing
Yeah.
it, and they're walking right past each other, they both were participating in that in
Hmm.
some way or the other. But I agree, and I mean, attraction is super important,
For
particularly
sure.
for at first, right?
Yeah.
That's what draws. But when you take a moment to give people a chance and you try to connect, there are
Mhm.
certain things that rise from that, and things can become more attractive. Um,
Yeah, and I'm curious about that too with you and your husband because obviously you guys started out as friends, and you had your eye on him in the sense more like he's the type of guy you should marry, like he's like that. But how did attraction like build? Because I think there's some confusion. I think some people are like, I don't believe attraction can build over time, or like if it's not there to
mhm.
begin with, then they're like, I don't think it's going to grow. So I'm curious for people who go from friendship to a relationship, how does attraction how did it shift for you or what did it feel
Well,
like?
I mean, I'm not. He's a good looking guy,
Yeah.
So I knew that. It just, um, he's a handsome, come from good
Yeah.
stock. He's, he's a good
Mhm.
looking guy. So it wasn't like someone who was completely not in your like, zone of who you would look at if maybe this was somebody you didn't know and it was a perfect stranger.
Mhm.
No, but in that case, I might have said, "Oh, hi," you know.
Mhm.
But it was the quality of the relationship that I didn't pay as much attention to it because I was more concerned about like the quality of the relationship that I wanted to maintain. So I dropped that. But it
So you
wasn't
didn't even let
like,
yourself, yeah.
but it technically, there was something like always, there. So
Mhm.
it wasn't like it had to be created. It
Mhm.
was just that it was being put, I don't know,
Like,
going like
suppressed. You were, like,
suppressed.
suppressing it, yeah.
Yeah, and not to the point where you were lying, to yourself.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot. I like good looking people are more. You're more likely to talk to. Like if anyone's
Mhm.
good looking, they do typically have more people who approach them, and and
Yeah.
that to me plays with friends too. Like
Mhm.
if I'm at an event and it's like I'm the only one if I come by myself,
Mhm.
if I decide to talk to someone, just there's something that was attractive, whether it's their purse or their
Mhm. Oh,
boots.
yeah,
You know
especially
what
women,
I'm
it's always the
saying?
shoe or the
It's the
bag or, like,
you
you're
know what
like,
I
"I
mean?
like that bag, she's got style, I feel like I'm gonna like her."
Yeah, so it's always something. And but if you think about it, so if you were to we'll take it off romance for a second. If you were to continue to cultivate something with her, you did have some kind of foundational thing, like you
Mhm.
appreciated something that you already know that this person
Mhm.
has, and then so that can build and that can
Yeah,
grow.
absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you so much. I feel like this has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we covered the gamut tonight.
Absolutely. And I really do enjoy talking about it because I don't have to face some elements. There's a
Yeah.
whole line that I do in order to stay the course. But there's a lot I love to continue to talk, and this reminds me these are important conversations to have for those who haven't gotten to this point and that are still curious. About how does that work, and it's not one shoe fits all, but there are some
Mhm.
foundational things that just, again, I didn't make this up. The God's design.
Yeah.
We both come from Christian homes. We
Yeah.
definitely had equally yoked values.
Yes.
So
That's a
hands
huge, that's like
down,
number 1. It's number
number
1.
one. Yeah,
Number
we knew
1.
what we
Same values.
wanted. Yeah, same values. We knew what we valued, and that being the center nucleus. Um,
Mhm.
that's what you can always go back to, and that's part of giving the grace. Like, hey, this is the same person who wants this, like
Mhm.
me. So let me approach everything with that in mind. Let me keep going back to that. Yeah,
Yeah, I think those are huge. I think, yeah, I think if you were to name your top 3 things before, as we conclude, for having a healthy an accent just kicked in, a healthy relationship in terms of your prospect, like when, for those of us that are single, that are out there, looking for their partner, it's like, what are the 3 things you think are the most important, that should be the most emphasized as someone is looking for a partner?
I believe that the person who you are looking and seeking long term should definitely share your values, particularly also your belief in your faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I know some people it works, but it's not as practical. It's a lot. That's a lot to have
Hmm.
to unravel if you're
Yeah.
not like equally yoked in your faith. At least your foundation of your faith, right?
Yeah.
People have different uh, ways they came to a faith, but if they fundamentally believe that that's going to be what they guide their family with,
Hmm.
that has to be. You can't like brush that off,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
maybe he'll come around, or oh, it's not that big of a deal if she. Okay, well, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
I think you have to be um, really self aware.
Hmm.
Um, you have to be in a space that you care about yourself, but that you're have a selfless approach,
Hmm.
because that's another thing that's really important in a long term relationship is that you have to really consider someone else every
Yeah.
day,
Every day. Yeah.
like every day, and it works when both people are doing it. all the issues
Yeah.
come when one person is only when it's one sided.
Mhm.
And then the other one is, um, I would say to trust yourself.
Hmm.
Um, I think we know a lot of things. We have our instincts. If you're
Mhm.
saved, you get the Holy Spirit tugging on you. And some of us, we hear it, but we don't adhere.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we, okay, and then we put it to the side. It eventually will ring its head because that was your warning and your forewarning.
It will.
Uh, and then if you keep moving forward against that grain, um, it's not gonna be something that you can build on.
No, you don't have peace in it. I think when
Hmm.
you work against the grain and you work against, I think, even the thing that you know is right, like you deep down you'll know, but as you try and try, and you're just like this, it will not, you will not have peace about it. You will not feel good about it. I feel like that's true in so many areas of our life. But
Hmm.
it's a muscle we have to flex of trusting that
Hmm.
feeling, you know?
You have to trust it. You have to trust it. And then I might interchange one with like you have to show up fully. You can't
Mhm.
expect someone to complete you.
I agree. I think that's a detriment to relationships is thinking that the other person is going to complete a part of you. It's like, no, you're two whole people that get to come together in a relationship and build
Hmm.
from there,
Right.
out of wholeness, because only God can fulfill that. If there's a hole,
Exactly.
only God can fill that. And I think if you put that on your spouse or a relationship, like that is too heavy of a
It's
burden for
too
someone to carry.
heavy.
It is too heavy. That is not their role. That is
That
not
is
their role.
not.
It's
It is
like
unfair.
I picture it like they're the support, they're next to you as you're advancing in whatever you're doing. They're there to help you, they're next to you. It's not that they're dragging you
Hmm.
or they're pulling you, in that sense. So it's like they don't just come into your life and now, oh, my life's, you know,
Right.
where it's always wanted it to be. It might enhance it, and you hope a relationship would enhance your life, but your
Hmm.
life isn't horrible without it. Your life is
Right.
complete without it.
Right.
Um, because it doesn't complete us. It just adds to life, and
Right.
I think that's a hard one. I think that's something we have to get kind of it. I almost want to say it's a practice we have in our singleness is to be content and
Hmm.
it's different. Being content and enjoying your singleness is different than I still desire. You can desire the other things, but it's not to the degree that it defines you and defines your life.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's a big one, and that's a good one. That's a good one to end on. But I think there's so much. I think there's so much that can be done in our time that we're single, whether you're single for a long time or you're single for a little bit of time, in your adult life. But it's never wasted, I think. And I think sometimes we just throw it away. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
just can't wait to be married. Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time to be married and all that. But there's also so much that you get, so much freedom you have in your singleness, so much time to grow, to make mistakes, to do all the things.
Hmm.
And I just want people to like enjoy it more. Like I
Yeah.
understand it gets harder as you get older to enjoy it and be content in it.
Right.
Trust me, I know. Um, but it's never wasted. So
I agree. I used to, a couple of people, over the years were like, well, this and this. And I was like, but there's all these things that you can do that I can't do. It's
mhm.
like you'll have the time. Don't
Yeah.
don't don't be so caught up in the timeline that you're missing, how you can contribute because you're in this position, and what that means. Yeah.
Yeah. And what life can look like in that. But
Hmm.
Um, thank you again. I appreciate your time and getting to chat with you and share your wisdom on this topic and just to hear the work that you're doing. Again, I think it's so important. And for those of us that maybe don't have kids that are in high school, we're not really, we don't see those kids. We don't see what's happening there. So I'm so grateful that you said yes to God's calling on your life because this is definitely what he's called you to do. And there's such a need for it. So I thank you for taking that leap of faith and being obedient to that and and just being able to see the fruit from it is awesome. So I just thank
Thank you.
you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that. And as someone, another thing that when people are single, this is a way that you can also pour into others, where you
Oh,
have a little more
100%.
freedom of your schedule. Like, be a mentor, think about volunteering and those things that you wish you have learned, and some of the things you've picked up now, you can deposit that back. So there's
Absolutely.
always a need for people to help and extend, volunteer, and contribute as a professional, or like a big sister, big brother. So those
Yeah.
are also really great ways to spend your time, um,
Yeah.
and you will reap because you're sowing. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll put information definitely in the description for the podcast. If people want to get connected to Grace and Wisdom Institute, we'll add all that information there as well. If anyone's interested in joining or just learning more about ways they can contribute, we'll definitely put that information there. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. Really, really good point is getting out there and serving and kind of taking the focus off of us and putting it onto
right,
others. I think
absolutely,
that's a valuable thing we don't do enough of in today's society. So,
yep.
but thank you so much. I appreciate you. And again, we'll put all that information at the bottom if you're interested in getting in touch.
Thank you, and you're very wise, and I'm really excited and proud of
Aw,
what you're doing as well.
that's very sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Can't wait.